For a speedrunner, having your accomplishments shown or talked about to an audience that's greater than the speedrunning world itself sounds like it should be exciting, right? But most of the time, or as oftentimes when I see it, it's really more like them just getting locked up in the stocks and everyone gets to throw tomatoes at them. And today, IGN wrote an article about Player 5, the world record holder of Breath of the Wild any percent. He did a 24-hour stream where he beat the game 50 times in one day. Now, that sounds like kind of a silly, goofy, fun time, you know? Sounds like just a fun stream to do. But boy, oh boy, are the Twitter comments full of every single tired, reductive blow-off that speedrunners just have to hear time and time again. So if you are someone who doesn't really understand the fun or the point of speedrunning, or you're someone who does and you just want to hear someone else talk about it for some catharsis, let's take a look through these Twitter comments, and let's bust some of these myths here, shall we? All right, so Nick here gives us the classic. This is like the classic. He says, "Can we please stop saying that they beat games? Speedrunners are just glitches that find ways to trigger the ending." Okay, well, first of all, Nick, the speedrunner themselves is not the glitch. You mean speedruns are just glitches, which, again, so this is like the extremely reductive thing that I'm talking about. However, here's the deal. Before we get into that, a lot of people agree with this, including speedrunners. So this is one of the hugest misconceptions about speedrunning, is that all speedruns are just going out of bounds, glitching past the whole game, triggering the ending in a matter of minutes or something like that. And some speedruns are like that. Some of them are. And a lot of people don't like those speedruns, and a lot of speedrunners of the games that have those speedruns don't like them either, and so they don't do that. They make other categories. So the big thing is that speedrunning itself is an arbitrary rule set. Every game is different, and it all just depends on what the runners actually want to run that creates a speedrun. There's no committee that decides what the laws of what it means to beat a game is. Instead, someone like me or you says, I beat the game this fast, right? And then someone else wants to compete with you, and now you've got your speedrun, right? But then if you want to say, okay, someone else says, I don't like all those glitches, so I'm going to do it without those. And then they run the game that way. And somebody else then says, oh, I like that more. I'm going to run it without glitches. And so I'm going to do that, right? And then that creates a whole category. So the main game that I run is Final Fantasy VII, and there's a couple examples of this. So if you take Final Fantasy VII, for example, it's a game that can be beaten in like an hour and a half by wrong warping to the end. People do a series of glitches, and they warp to the end of the game, and they can then beat it in about an hour and a half. Now, the thing is, that's only on the PC version. I play the PS1 version, which doesn't have that. And then even a more restrictive thing is that, so on the PS1, generally the fastest way to beat the game is to get this one really overpowered move that one of the characters can get, and that's able to just one-shot all the bosses throughout the rest of the game. I think that's kind of boring, and a lot of other people think that as well, and so the actual most popular category for Final Fantasy VII is not the hour and a half one. It's not the one-shot all the bosses one. It's the one that is played on the PS1 console, meaning none of the wrong warp stuff is available, and we just banned the use of that one move, and you have to play through the game that way. Even then, that category does have some major skips in it that do skip like 20-minute sections of the game by doing some glitchy stuff, and there are people who don't even like that. And recently, growing in popularity a lot is even the no major skips category, where they don't even do that. And there are plenty of runners that run that right now. So my whole point is that the deal is, logically, there is just a way to beat the game as fast as possible by any means necessary. And just by its very nature, that is a category that's going to exist, when I power on my console, how quickly can I get the credits to roll, maybe, or that kind of thing. Just logically, it makes sense that there is almost always a category that is just anything goes. Whether or not that's actually the most popular category, or whether or not there is a category that doesn't allow glitches, is up to whether there's interest for it. And in a lot of games, there is. So yeah, for this kind of thing, I just can't stress enough that, like, if you think that the rule set for a speedrun is too lax, then the game that you're talking about probably has a more strict rule set that you can run or watch, or, you know, maybe it's not the game for you because the game is too broken or something like that. I don't know. But there's solutions, and just, again, speedrunning's arbitrary, and all of the categories are just made by runners who are interested in running a certain kind of way. The final boss says, did they use glitches? Because of they used glitches, then I don't count that as being in the game. Once again, I already went over glitches, but it's just, you see this so much. But I do want to hone in on something like ever so slightly more granular about the subject as well. People love to throw the word glitch around without necessarily maybe even really considering what it means, and what the boundaries are for what you can consider a glitch. For example, let's talk about Final Fantasy VII again. There's these guards that are standing in this spot, and you can wiggle past them and run past them, and that skips like a 20-minute section of the game. Now, here's the deal, though. No glitch is happening here. There's nothing in the game code that is running improperly or anything like that. These guards are just simply not placed correctly by the developer, and you can wiggle past them and go through the door that is programmed in behind them. So as speedrunners, when we talk about like a glitchless category, such as, like I was talking about, no major skips for Final Fantasy VII, that's recently been more popular, there's a lot of debate among runners and watchers around what we can really even call a glitch. That's actually why for FF7 we had to ultimately settle on it being no major skips and not no major glitches, because, you know, for something like guard skip, for example, it's not a glitch, but it is a skip, right? And so it's a lot more nuanced than it might seem at first. And so you really sort of have to, like, when you're gonna kind of throw out these rules that you make, like, I don't consider it a run if X, like, you sort of gotta, like, think about X, like, give me a definition of it, you know? This is kind of a small one. Tiny Hands says, that easy, huh? Like, Breath of the Wild is really easy. Like, anyone can sit down and just beat the game in 5 minutes. Oh, wow, the game is that easy, huh? This guy, Player 5, probably plays this game almost every day and practices the shit out of it, and has put a ton of effort into getting as good as he is at the game. But now, on this particular tweet, I'm kind of picking up an implication that, like, Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess is more difficult. However, Ocarina of Time has an even shorter any percent category. That one's less than 5 minutes long, so good job, Tiny Hands. This is a really big one as well. Then the Manuel says, then the game isn't fun to him anymore. First of all, who are you to say, right? Oh, you've got a real nice psychological reading on this guy that you've never heard of until a minute ago. But in all seriousness, though, so Final Fantasy VII has been my favorite game since I was a kid, and ever since I started speedrunning it, I've liked it more than ever. Because when you speedrun a game, you start to learn about mechanics that you never knew existed, or just strategies that you had never thought of before. You start, you practice the game a lot, and then a lot of it goes into research as well, though. And just playing the game a lot, being around it a lot, hearing a lot of positivity around the game a lot, from the people that are around you and share the enthusiasm for the game with you. I mean, really, for like, I can't speak for everyone. Of course, there are people that kind of think, maybe get a little bit too in the woods with speedrunning, where they start to try to push themselves towards a goal that maybe they're not enjoying anymore, right? I'm sure that does happen. But as like a grand majority, I mean, people speedrun because they enjoy it. It is first and foremost a hobby that we enjoy. And at least for me, I'm for sure enjoying the games that I speedrun more than I ever have. Babu's got a very simple question of why. Why not? Demonic Robot says, I think people need to learn that actual definition of beating the game rather than their headcanon version of beating the game. This is a very confusingly worded sentence. Like, the first time I read it, I thought it was a sentence fragment. But if we give them the most benefit of the doubt possible, they're saying, I think people need to learn that actual definition, as if they're talking about like that one, like a specific one. That would actually make this a complete sentence if it were spoken that way. That's very awkward and weird, and I don't think that that's the case here. I think that this is just like halfway through the sentence, the thought kind of got away from them and changed to a different thing, and then they have like two different sentences fused together here. But regardless, once again, we're this is the biggest topic that gets beaten in. That I've already said, which is that their headcanon version. Yes, speedrunning is arbitrary, and the rule sets are created by whoever wants to run the game. And when a lot of people run one particular rule set, it becomes competitive. So here's a really common one. Do they get paid for this? This question comes up very frequently, and it's kind of interesting to me. Not always. It depends. It does speed running a game get you money just by default? No. Like if I turn on Super Mario Bros. On my NES and I beat it in 4.5 minutes, the money isn't just going to come showering down from the ceiling on me, right? However, also, Demonic Robots, our friend from a moment ago, chimes in here himself. He says he's educated on this topic and says technically no, he doesn't. There is no money in speedrunning. For the most part, directly, it is indirect, like Twitch partner or donations. Which, yes, the player in question, Player 5, is a Twitch partner, and he did get paid during this stream. By his viewers. So technically, yes, he did get paid for this. Like, this is the weirdest sentence to me once again. It's like saying, I'm a carpenter. I built a house today. And someone's like, wow, did you get paid for it? Well, no, technically I didn't get paid for building the house. But I got paid by the company that pays me to build houses. I got money indirectly from them. The house itself did not pay me. This is very, what are you talking about? The answer is yes, he got paid for this. But in the greater scheme of things, different people speedrun for different reasons. Some people get paid, some people don't, right? Some people do it purely as a hobby. Instead of watching another season of Breaking Bad, they're gonna jam out some speedruns and maybe get a world record or something, in a game that people care about, and that's pretty cool, right? Something like that. It's just a hobby for some people. But some people get popular doing it live, and if you're popular doing it live, then people will give you money to support you, and you get paid for it. Gryffindor says, good for him. We don't care, though. You cared enough to stop what you were doing and leave a comment. Okay, this one isn't really inflammatory. It's just kind of funny. This is Rafe says, that's not possible. I've had the game for years and haven't completed it. Granted, I haven't played that much of it, but, granted, this thing, I'm not really, that educated in it. I haven't really beaten it myself or anything, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say that I am the authority on what is and is not possible and this one just does not pass the test. I'm not gonna like watch the video that's provided or anything like that. You know, it's not like there's proof of this readily available. It's not possible. Sarcasm personified. So maybe this is actually just sarcastic, but I don't understand why that's fun, they say. We touched on fun a little bit earlier, but in sort of a different context, where it's like, is playing the game fun to them anymore? So to me, the thing that's fun about speedrunning is it almost implements like a score system into games that don't have a score system for games that you really like. So if you've already beaten a game, or you've beaten a game a lot of times already, and you're starting to feel like you're pretty good at it, because you really like the game, without like a score system, you might not have necessarily a more difficult goal to shoot for. Take pinball or Donkey Kong, for example. Let's talk about pinball, right? The first time that you play around a pinball, there is no basis for how well you need to do. You just play until you're done, right? But you get a score. And now this bar has been set. And so now the bar of difficulty is set at that score. You got to do better than that, you know? And then once you beat that, you know, now there's a concept of winning or losing in a game that didn't have it before. You know what I mean? If you beat your score, you won. If you don't, you lose, right? Now those stakes are more exciting and fun, right? And then when you beat that score, eventually you need to start kind of learning some new moves, you know? You need to start figuring out and sort of optimizing like what parts of the game are the most beneficial for you, what's the higher risk versus reward, and that kind of thing. And you start to really learn the game's mechanics, and, you know, to a lot of people, that's when it really starts to get fun. And so speedrunning is the same way, because if you take a game that maybe isn't even all that difficult at the start, right? Breath of the Wild is a game where you can spend hours and hours and hours, like hundreds of hours, over preparing yourself for the last boss, and then the last boss is a cakewalk, you know? I've even heard people complain about the game, where like once you get to the last boss, it's too easy, you know? Well, how about you try to do it faster, right? That introduces a new layer of difficulty that wasn't there before. That introduces the concept that you can lose by reaching your previous best time and not having done it yet, you know? And so the harder you push your time down, the less preparation you have, which means the better you have to execute, but also you need to start dropping things that would help you and introduce some risk to then get faster results. And that's super fun. That's like high stakes, and you know, it introduces a whole nother level to the game that might not have been there before for you. But now, you know, you've got this time that you're trying to push down, and I think that's really where the fun comes into play. So to give sarcasm here the benefit of the doubt also, maybe by that they specifically mean 50 runs in one day, whether or not they, you know, got their personal best. It was just 50 in a day. Maybe they think that sounds dumb. I don't know. The guy's not doing it every day. Seemed like a goofy thing to like try out, you know, hey, we're going to go for 24 hours and beat the game a ridiculous number of times in one day. It's just silly and fun. And hey, it's silly, fun, and unique enough that a major game publication wrote a news article about him. So, you know, it sounds pretty fun to me. All right, we've got kind of the next category here, which is if he's under 16, that's impressive. If he's older than, he got way too much free time on his hands. Oh, okay. So I like that this person has arbitrarily created, you know, their line. This is the line that you can't cross. If you're under 16, do whatever you want. But once you're over 16, no more fun. But the thing is, like, this whole idea of, like, telling other people what to do with their free time is hilarious to me, because, like, how many seasons of TV have you watched? Look, now I'm doing it. Now I'm making assumptions about his life. But like, people need to spend their time doing something, you know? Like, what do you do to relax? My dad likes to make sculptures with a chainsaw, you know? Or sometimes he's working on an old car or something, right? It's fun for him, right? This guy likes to get world records at video games that everybody plays. But then we've got another one. Time to get a job, hobby, life. So funny thing about this is that this is both for this guy. This guy is a partner Twitch streamer, and you could very much make that your job. I don't know Player 5 personally. I don't know if this is his job, but for many people, it is their job. And I would say, though, for most, like the vast majority of speedrunners, they just have a job, and this is their hobby. So, I mean, like, it's one of those things where, like, if you think about this for 2 seconds and consider that the person that you're talking about is an actual human being, then this question should never even enter your mind in the first place, right? It's a hobby, maybe it's your job, or, it's both, right? And time to get a life is just a hell of an assumption to make about a person who spent 1 day of their life doing something silly and ridiculous and got an article written about them about it. This gets into, I mean, you can really get into the woods on this kind of topic with things like, I mean, I think that speedrunning is a very, like, goal-oriented hobby. Personally, I think it's, like, extremely mentally healthy to have something that you are always trying to improve yourself on. You pretty much always have a short-term and a long-term goal about it. It requires, just a lot of research and practice. And also, it requires a lot of endurance, like mental endurance for failure. As in, once you get to the level where you're pushing world record in a popular game, most of your runs are not going to achieve your goal, Every time Player 5 boots up Breath of the Wild, he's not getting the new world record, right? It's something that you need to have a lot of conviction for in order to really, press through all of your shortcomings in order to ultimately achieve your goal. And so, like, one of the huge reasons that speedrunning is so appealing to me is that, like, mental satisfaction part of it. But apparently I don't have a life because you've only seen me in a YouTube video, which means I exist only within this box. And when you turn this video off, I cease to exist. I don't have a life. How easy is this game? Like, if you actually watch the speedrun, you'd be pretty blown away by how difficult it is. This is sort of another really common misconception just in general, is that, like, the speedrun strats that do things quickly are somehow easier than not doing it that way. Breath of the Wild is a game that, like, isn't super difficult, especially if you put a lot of time into it. Oh, wow. Did you hear what I just said? So, like, if you have to go fast, and if you have to do everything very quickly, it means that you're super, super, super unprepared, as opposed to how you could be for the ending, Anybody casually can put 300 hours into the game and then just stomp the last boss. But if you are trying to circumvent all that in order to bring your time down, it means that you have to be perfect on the ending of the game in order to actually be able to accomplish beating the last boss. Like, most of the time, learning a speed strat requires a large amount of research and practice in order to get consistent with it. And that's because it's difficult, right? And then they make it look easy because they've practiced it and they're really good at it. This also comes into play a lot with, like, RNG manipulation kind of stuff, where, like, people do weird, kooky, crazy things in order to, like, get the game's RNG to work in their favor or that kind of thing. And a lot of the time, like, the misconception is that that's easier than dealing with the RNG. When a lot of the time, the extremely, like, scientific way that it's being performed is much more difficult than just doing it normally. For example, in Final Fantasy VII, there's this elevator where, like, any old jackass can just hit the button a bunch of times and get into a bunch of fights on the way up. But you could avoid all those fights by doing this extremely technical, complicated setup and execution that gets you through with only having to fight one battle. And people, a lot of people unfamiliar would hear that and be like, oh, you have to do less battles? That must be easier. No. The battles are easy. They're just slow. And so the RNG manipulation is extremely technical and difficult to do, but it's faster. And you see that a lot in this Breath of the Wild playthrough, where, like, when Player 5 has to do the shrines, he's doing these strats where he's, like, using a bomb to explode his Link over to the other side of the shrine, right? It would be so much easier for any old casual player to just solve the puzzle of the shrine and go through it. The shrines are not that difficult in the game. You know what is difficult? Perfectly, precisely lining up this bomb to blast Link into almost this almost exact position every time, consistently, right? Like, that's difficult. It's just faster. Another one of these from David Cabrera. Yikes. Dude has nothing else going on? Any life outside the walls of his house, LOL? Again, like, it's such a weird assumption to make about people. Like, I realized a little bit of conflict in what I'm saying, where it's like I'm saying about how difficult this stuff is to pull off and how much, like, research and practice it takes. But, I mean, like, think about for a second how much time there is in life. If you are, like, I'm someone who doesn't really watch TV, right? And I don't really watch sports or anything. And so, like, that kind of thing gives me quite a bit of free time to practice. But I love the idea that because I say that, that means that it's 24/7, that I never leave the house and I don't go to the bathroom, and just because I've put some time into this one hobby of mine, it must be all I do. It's a very weird, like, min-maxy way to think. You'd make a good speedrunner with this, your idea of with this min-maxing idea here. And then you get into gems like this. This is the last kind of thing I'm going to talk about, but it comes up all the time. That will definitely get him laid, Mini Plod Magpie says. It's very silly to me to always see this come up. It's like people get so threatened anytime that somebody else is, like, getting recognition for getting really good at something that they're interested in, like, oh, somebody else did something that was really, like, mentally fulfilling for them. Somebody else achieved their goals or something. It's like people get it's like their self-worth gets so threatened when they see articles about other people like this, that they have to, like, revert back to the most lizard brain possible thing of, like, oh, well, sex, I'm better at that. It's fucking pathetic, dude. And again, it's just one of those things where it's like people, it's nutty to me the way that, like, it's just this kind of perception where it's like, so this guy is a speedrunner on the internet. And so when you see him on the internet, he's doing speedrunning because that's what he's on the internet for, right? And so if that's the only thing that you ever see him doing, then it's like it creates this... It's like people seem to think that means that literally is when they exist. Like, people think that David Duchovny is Fox Mulder, I guess, because that's all they've seen him on. And then when they see him in another show, they're like, wait, what? Huh? All right. So anyway, these are just the types of comments that you have to hear all the time as a speedrunner. And this IGN article just, and Twitter being what it is, kind of just put them all into one place here for me. So I wanted to go through that and maybe answer some questions for people as far as speedrunning goes, or just, you know, again, offer some catharsis for people, you know, my fellow speedrunners who also have to hear all this stuff all day, every day. But that's it for now. See you next time. Oh, yeah. I mean, like, you guys can see him on this other camera, too. I can just lift him up like this. Here he is.